Greetings hunters, I'm Mist, and welcome to my guide on hunting the Great Jagras. Now I know what some of you might be thinking, Great Jagras? He's not that hard, he's the first big monster you fight. I know that, but this guide is for those of you who may have struggled, or still be struggling, or for new hunters who are trying to get to grips with the new world. Great Jagras is a large monster. In fact, he's the first large monster you'll see upon your unceremonious landing in the new world. He's basically a gigantic glutton of a yellow lizard with some funny hair. He's also the first large monster you hunt in the main quest line. Obviously, he's the giant version of the regular Jagras you see running around, and he'll be your first real test to see how your skills hold up against such a large monster. Let's start with some basic information on Great Jagras, starting with where you find him. The Great Jagras shows up only in the ancient forest, which is where you'll always find him during his related quests and investigations. He also only hangs out in the lower areas before you climb up into the tree itself. He's generally pretty easy to find, as compared to some other monsters, Pink Rathian, I'm looking at you, as he leaves plenty of tracks and generally has a fairly small and easy to follow path he walks. Let's quickly go over the lore, if you will, of the Great Jagras. Under his characteristics, it says that he is the pack leader of the Jagras, and when they're hungry, they're known to attack monsters much larger than they are. Their stomachs also engorge to a very large size when they eat. This will be important to remember for later. Under useful information, it says that even after a huge meal, the Great Jagras can use its stomach to attack hunters, aim for its belly to make it vomit up its prey and significantly weaken it. Again, this is important to remember for later. Now let's have a look at Great Jagras' weakness and weak points. Looking at his physiology page, we can see that his head, belly and legs are all weak points and all breakable. So unlike some other monsters you see in the new world, you really do want to be focusing all your time on his head and in his head area. Breaking his head will often stagger or stun him, and breaking his belly, especially if it's full, will weaken him considerably. We'll go more into the importance of breaking monster parts later in the guide. Looking at the elements chart, we can see that the Great Jagras has a 3-star weakness to fire, making fire a great choice. However, if you're a brand new squeaky clean hunter, chances are you don't have access to any elemental weapons yet, so just use what you have. He also has a 2-star weakness to both thunder and ice, making them acceptable choices but not the best. And then he has a 1-star weakness to dragon, making it less than ideal but it'll be fine, and no weakness to water, so do not use a water weapon against the Great Jagras. Looking into the ailment chart now, we can see that he has a 3-star weakness across the board to poison, sleep, paralysis, blast and stun, making him an easy target for status ailments. Once again, if you're a new hunter, you may not have access to these ailments, so just take your best weapon. But for those maybe farming him, either in low or high rank, this makes him easy pickings, especially to a weapon like the light or heavy bowgun or the bow, where you can easily status him for that extra damage. Now let's briefly look into his rewards. Starting with low rank, you can get the Great Jagras' scale, hide, mane, and claw from carving. However, you only get the mane if you break his head. In the quest rewards, you can get hide, scale, mane, claw, iron ore, and monster bone S. All of these monster parts are extremely useful if you're farming for your first armor set beyond the starting gear, or farming for your first weapon. In high rank, you can get the high rank versions of his hide, scale, and claw, and from the quest rewards you can get the high rank hide, claw, and scale, and the mane and monster bone plus. Again, all of these items are very useful if you're farming for gear. If you want to know the exact percentage drops of every single item, there is a very useful wiki. I'll leave a link down in the description. Now let's look into fighting the Great Jagras, more specifically his attacks. The Great Jagras isn't an openly aggressive monster, but he will become aggressive if you attack him, as you can see in the footage here. He doesn't have a lot of moves, though he does have a couple of different things once he's eaten. I'll show you all of that as well. I'll put his attacks into 2 categories: when his belly is empty and when he has just eaten and his belly is full. Keep in mind that even when his belly is full, he will still use some of his other attacks. Starting with his attacks when his belly is empty, he has this forward charge attack. Pretty simple. He raises his head to one side, pulls back slightly and charges forward in the direction he has targeted. It's easy enough to avoid this attack, just roll at a 90-degree angle away from him and you'll be out of his way. The attack has a bit of a cooldown, allowing for some easy hits. Next we have a simple claw swipe. The Great Jagras will pull his head back and swipe forward. He seems to only do this with the left claw, and he steps forward slightly when he does it. Easy peasy, roll away from him and you'll be just fine. A slightly more powerful version of the swipe is the lunging swipe. He rears up his body with one of his front claws raised and lunges forward, swiping as he does so. You'll want to roll away from the Great Jagras, probably at that 90-degree angle, to avoid this attack. This does have a longer cooldown than the regular swipe, giving you an easy opening for some good hits. Great Jagras then has a lunge bite. Similar to the lunge swipe, he will rear up on his back legs with his mouth open, then come down and bite, lunging a short distance. This has a decent length of tail, so you can easily run away if your weapon is sheathed, or roll away to stay out of the hit zone. Great Jagras does have a regular bite attack as well. He will lift his head to the left or right and bite towards you. Roll away from him and you'll be just fine. However, the tail is very short, so he may still catch you off guard with this one. Next we have the forward bite. The Great Jagras will pull his head back and bite forward. Once again, you can roll away from him and you'll avoid his jaws. Last of all, we have a tail swipe. He will lift his tail and swipe to the left or right once only. Unlike some monsters, he seems to only swipe once. He will only do this if you are behind him, and it's easy to tell, so roll away and you'll avoid that big tail slap. Now for the attacks when he has a full belly, we'll start with his belly flop. The Great Jagras will lift his body into the air and come crashing down on the ground. This attack does quite a bit of damage and it will pin you, as well as causing a small tremor. Definitely an attack you don't want to get hit by. Once you see the tail, roll away at that magical 90-degree angle, or run away if your weapon is sheathed, and you'll stay out of that hit zone. Last of all, we have a big roll attack. There seems to be two versions of this, a stationary roll and a charge roll, but the tell is the same. He will lift one leg and his head in the direction he intends to roll, then do a single rotation in that direction. In the case of the charge roll, he will instead do a couple of side steps and then roll instead. Once you see the tell for this, you can roll away from him or roll perpendicular to him, depending on where you are in relation to his head and tail. As a final note to watch out for, the Great Jagras can projectile vomit food at you. This does a small amount of damage, but it can catch you off guard, so keep an eye out for it. The easiest way to avoid it is when you see the tail, roll away and you'll be out of range. Gross, by the way. Now we'll move on to some weapon tips. I'm not going to cover all 14 weapons as that would take away too long. However, I will cover the separate weapon subtypes, which for me are fast weapons, like the longsword, insect glaive and dual blades, slow weapons like the hammer, the hunting horn and the great sword, shielded weapons like the lance and gun lance, and ranged weapons which are your bow, light bowgun and heavy bowgun. Realistically, when it comes to hunting any monster, it's about whatever you feel most comfortable with. These are just my personal weapon highlights. Starting off with the fast weapons. I find these have an easy time against Great Jagras, as it's so easy to avoid all of his attacks, thanks to your agility. You do need to take more advantage of your openings however, as they don't deal as much damage as some of the harder hitting weapons. I'll leave a special mention to the longsword here, as I find that the rapid attacks are very good for breaking his parts, and that helm splitter is crazy powerful if you manage to knock him down or stun him. Moving on to the slow weapons, and the biggest key here is patience. He can be a bit of a pain with a slower weapon, but he does leave some decent openings after his attacks. Be patient and take advantage of his openings to get some big hits in. I'll make a special mention of the hunting horn here, as the number of times I managed to KO him with it was just insane. Then we have shielded weapons. In my opinion, these turn the Great Jagras into a little kitten. You can easily block all of his attacks, provided you get the timing. You can deal great damage, and he can't do anything about it. I'll make a special mention of the lance, since that charge attack is brilliant for chasing him if he decides to charge halfway across the area. Last of all, we have the ranged weapons. These also have a great time against the Great Jagras, as he spends all of his time chasing you and none of it hitting you if you get it right. The light bowgun was my personal favourite here, as its sticky and slicing shots along with that piercing ammo give me great damage and an overall fast hunt. One more thing for you guys to keep in mind is that the Great Jagras is a hungry monster, and as I mentioned earlier, he is very susceptible to status, so don't forget to bring along your tainted, tinged and sleepy meats. You will notice in my footage that the Devil Joe did show up and try to ruin my hunt twice. We'll get back to you later, Mr. Murder Pickle. And overall, that's it. That's my guide, tips and tricks to hunting the Great Jagras. I hope this video helped you out. I'd really appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe to see more. Share this video with your hunting friends, and I'll see you for the next hunt.